again, my name is Sylvia Thomas. I was born and raised in Chicago, but I want to tell y'all about my grandfather because he migrated from Mississippi. He was born in like the 1880s during Reconstruction. He had a white father and a black mother. I know there were 3 brothers that I know of. And basically my grandmother didn't have any choice about, having those children, and she didn't have anything to say about it. They were still doing that up into the 50s in the South. My grandfather was born in Edwards, Mississippi. I don't know where that is, but that's where he came from. I know he left at 14. He ran away and he came up north to seek his fortune. And he actually wound up in Wisconsin in the Green Bay area. And there was some big, what was this guy? His name was John Strange, and he was this big paper magnate, owned the town and everything. And he lived in Menasha, Wisconsin. And that's where the Kimberly-Clark products come from. They were in Neenah as well as the Neenah Foundry, and John Strange was over in Menasha. There was like a little river, little tiny river separating them. They were called the Twin Cities. And then my grandfather worked for this man for most of his life. He ended up being a foreman in his plant. Both my father and his brother worked there, and they all grew up in Menasha. But my grandfather would come to Chicago. That's where everybody went for entertainment. My grandmother's people were from South Carolina. They had been in Chicago for generations. They were members of Bethesda Baptist Church. I can't remember what her father did. But anyway, she met my grandfather, in Chicago. And so he ended up coming to Chicago over and over again in order to court her. And then they married, and then he took her back to Menasha, and they raised their children in Menasha. And but my father came here. He was in the Army. He was in pharmacy school, and then he got drafted. And then he went back and finished pharmacy school, and then he worked for Walgreens for 40 years. And he also worked for a black pharmacist, an independent pharmacist named Jerry Black, who had a pharmacy on King Drive in the 30s. It was down the street from the old Regal Theater, across the street from where the T.K. Lawless building is. And T.K. Lawless was a physician here. He was a dermatologist. He had a huge following in the city. Half of my family, that came here, because a lot of them ended up coming to Chicago, were patients of his. There were I only saw black doctors and black dentists when I was growing up. And it was so cool. It was on little insulated things. I actually am a baby boomer. I grew up in the 50s and 60s. We had Dr. Runner, was a pediatrician, Dr. Beverly, Dr. Thomas, and then we had Dr. Coble, and he was the black dentist that everybody went to, and his son, after he retired, his son, Coble Jr., and, they were all in that area where Dr. Lawless was and Jerry Black, the pharmacy, right across the street, so we had everything like all, right there. It was actually in a part of Bronzeville. So, and actually my grandfather told a story of the Jim Crow that was in Chicago at that time, because he would have come here like in the 1900s or something, and black people were not allowed. There was Jim Crow in Chicago. A lot of people don't know that because it disappeared and it wasn't anywhere near as blatant. They just had other ways of discriminating. But at one time, black people were not allowed on the ground floor of any theater. They had balconies, and in the balconies was the only place black people were allowed, and it was called nigger heaven, because that's where all the black folks were up above everybody else. But my grandfather was very trusted by his boss, John Strange, and he would get theater tickets from him and pay him for them, and he would order them. And so because he got them from his boss, and they would be in the dress circle, the really high-priced tickets. But my grandfather told my grandmother, I don't know how to, act around all of these people, because they're going to be, all acting all crazy. And she said, I tell you what you do. You hold your head up, you look straight ahead, and you march right down to that dress circle, and you just take your seat and just sit there and enjoy, the performance. And he said everybody was turning their heads looking at him and stuff. my grandmother just walked, and she was short, but, you know, she held her head erect and stuff, and my grandfather was tall, and he just walked up there, and everybody stared at him, but nobody messed with him, and, you know, they would enjoy the performance. He said he would come to Chicago periodically and do that during their courting days, you know. So, you know, I realized even though I didn't immigrate, I was, you know, like born here, I'm still, you know, and I've never been to Mississippi, but one of my aunties, one of his daughters, was a professor at the University of Mississippi, and she was kind of, according to my family, single-handedly invented the communications department in the 60s, I guess it would have been. She went to Loyola University up here because they paid black people that wanted to go to college to come up north. They didn't want them down there. But then after she got her doctorate, then she went back there, you know, to Ole Miss. And, you know, so, you know, I think this is an important story and it needs to be told too. Okay.
Cool. All right. Well, yeah, you got anything else you want to say? About, you know, maybe why this history should be preserved? Or? Well,
it should be preserved because it's important to us. You know, when I was in school, the only thing we heard was, oh, black people were slaves, and, well, they were taught Christianity, so actually the slave masters were doing our people a favor and all that kind of nonsense. And, you know, so, you know, we grew up a generation, and we were then in the 60s, so I grew up in the 60s. You can probably tell I'm real militant. They would tell us, well, you know, well, why isn't black history the things our people really did in the history books? And they tell us, well, you can go to the library. I'm like, well, you have your history in the history books. Why do we have to go to the library? Y'all don't have to go to the library. Why do we have to dig it up, and you all are feeding us all this stuff about George Washington and Thomas Jefferson? They were all slave owners. And they were not our founding fathers. I mean, a lot of them fathered black people on the wrong side of the blanket, and they were still in slavery. And, you know, so our people have grown up thinking that that's all we are, is the, you know, the children of slaves. And it's like, our people had a history before the white people in Europe. For thousands of years, we had great empires in Timbuktu and Songhai in the west, and over there in Egypt and Ethiopia, you know, in Eastern Africa, in the Zulu Empire in the south, and all kinds of Kenya and all kinds of stuff. And the Asante in Ghana. And we don't even know anything about this because we were told you don't have anything to do with them African people. And, you know, so we've grown up thinking that's all we are, and it's extremely easy to take advantage of somebody that thinks that all you were was a slave anyway. You lucky we even look at you. And, you know, we come from a great people, and as Marcus Garvey said, our job is to restore our people to our former greatness. You know, our history didn't start with slavery. That was a part of our history. Our history started thousands of years before that, and it will hopefully go on thousands of years after that. And, you know, I am very honored to have this chance to be a part of that.